Hola, bienvenidos a esta entrevista.
Hello and welcome to this joint interview on France 24 and Radio France International with the President of Republic of Colombia, Juan Manuel Santos. Mr. President, hello.
Thank you.
Together with me, a colleague of Radio France International, Carlos Herranz. Hello. Thank you, Mr. President, for granting us this interview. It seems that this day, June 23rd, is a historic day for the peace process. You achieved 40% of disarmament, and today you could announce that there is a 100% disarmament.
Yes, well, disarmament is taking place in stages. The first stage was 30%, and this is now complete. The second stage is another 30%, and the end of this stage has also been announced. And the end of this stage began on the 20th of June and is due to be completed today. In other words, today, normally, the United Nations will announce the end of this third and final stage, and this will mean that disarmament has been completed and that the FARC will no longer exist as an armed group, and this is therefore a historic moment for Colombia.
For you, today is a highly historic day because it's the end of the war.
When disarmament is 100% completed, with verification by the UN, this will probably be the most important turning point in the implementation of the agreement. As from this moment, we will have tangible evidence that peace is beginning.
You're on a visit in France. You have met with President Emmanuel Macron, who promised a package of 350 million to finance the after-conflict. There are some concerns around this financing regarding the implementation. What are the guarantees in terms of solvency for the financing of the after-conflict?
Well, the post-conflict period will take time. We've given ourselves 15 years to achieve all of the targets we set ourselves. It's a comprehensive, holistic process. We will have to develop certain areas of the country, develop public infrastructure. This is a process that we're implementing with a certain number of very precise plans, particularly in those regions of the country that are most affected by the conflict. It's a tremendous opportunity for Colombia. Half of our territory still remains to be developed, precisely because the conflict did not enable the state to be present, but from now on the state will be present.
Well, there are some questions about the robustness of this agreement. It displeases some wish to modify it or even to suppress it. For you, is it absolutely finalized? Can it be changed or modified? While there are some people who dislike it.
This agreement is irreversible. We've reached a point where it's impossible to go backwards. How could you imagine that the FARC, having handed in their weapons, could then take them up again and take up the fight again? That would make no sense. And this agreement is something that's part of our constitution. No one can modify these agreements in the future. The Colombian state is committed to this process, the president and the Congress, which has ratified the agreement. And this is something that is part of the process. Obviously, there'll be people who complain and who would have preferred it to go in the direction they would like. It can never be perfect. It is imperfect by its very nature, but believe me, peace is always better than war.
According to your own words, you said a perfect justice doesn't create the conditions for peace. You said it last fall. So you talk about transitional justice, and there will be some elements of impunity.
Not necessarily impunity. It's different system of justice from that which we're used, which is more punitive. If you've committed a crime, you'll find yourself in prison for 40 years. Whereas transitional justice was invented precisely to promote the peace process. It's what I would call more of a restorative or reparative process. But the important thing is that there will be no impunity for those who've been primarily responsible for war crimes or crimes against humanity. we have created a very complex system of transitional justice, and the experts say that this is one of the best systems that's ever been negotiated in the world, something that could serve as a model for other conflicts, and that we will be implementing the next few weeks.
Today is a historic day regarding the process with the FARC. There are other fighting elements. The ELN, there are negotiations underway for some months in Ecuador, but they're not moving forward very quickly. Do you hope, thanks to what's happening with the FARC, that those negotiations with ELN will be able to be sped up?
Well, I hope so, but I can't guarantee it. To negotiate, there have to be two sides who agree to negotiate. The process may be slow, but I think the process will have to speed up. Otherwise, the ELN will be forgotten by history, and ELN knows it. Colombia is not going to set up another system of transitional justice, another post-conflict management system. So I hope that the ELN will understand that it's in its interest to join the process, because this will be the solution for all Colombians.
Mr. President, the terrorist attack in Bogota last week shows that Colombia is still very polarized. My question is, violence is going beyond peace with FARC or with ELN, because there are some criminal groups, a long list of social leaders who were murdered ever since the agreement was signed with the FARC.
Yes, after 53 years of war, violence is not going to stop overnight. But the figures for murder, for kidnappings, or terrorist attacks are now at their lowest level in 40 years. The ceasefire with the FARC has worked more than perfectly. There haven't been any incidents with the FARC. And gradually, other forms of violence will be brought under control by the police and the army, and they have been able to gain experience because of the war. There are now criminal gangs that want to take over the drug trafficking in the areas that the FARC have given up, who want to keep control over illegal mines. We're going to continue to combat these gangs. A number of leaders of social groups have been killed, have been assassinated because they were in favor of replacing illegal crops by legal crops. And obviously, drug traffickers don't want that, because that is their what would they live off. But we're going to combat these crimes, and the crime-solving rate for these crimes by the Office of the Public Prosecutor in Colombia is the highest in history. We're going to continue, and there is a verification commission working with humanitarian NGOs that will follow the situation. These are the inevitable consequences of the transition between the war and peace.
According to you, who's behind those terrorist attacks? What are the hypotheses?
Investigation is underway. There are several hypotheses. I don't want to talk about this now, because whatever I say could be used against us or could hamper the investigation, but these people will be brought to justice very quickly.
Mr. President, you enjoy a worldwide popularity. You were awarded the Nobel Prize, but your popularity in Colombia is very weak, 14% only. Many Colombians do not approve your management or the way you manage the country. There were several labor disputes, teachers, taxi drivers. Some people say you focused too much on peace process and neglected the other realities of the country.
The growth rate of Colombia, according to an announcement by OECD a couple of days ago, is higher than that of any other country in the organization except for Turkey. We have lifted more than 5 million people out of poverty. This has never been seen in Colombia before. Extreme poverty has been reduced by half. We have connected up the whole of the country with optical fiber. and broadband throughout the whole country. Education is free now for everyone, from first grade to school-leaving certificate. 14% move to higher education. We also have universal health care. And as regards the trade unions, they are more dynamic than ever. And so I would answer to you with factors and figures that have not been invented by the government. These are the reality. And it's not members of the government that say this, it's IMF, World Bank, or OECD. And in Colombia, what we're seeing now is a revolution in terms of public infrastructure. We're investing 18 billion in roads, ports, airports, and so we can go further and even quicker. And regarding the figures you mentioned about my popularity, it's not 40%, but 30%. But in any case, political capital is there to spend and not to hoard. We need to do what needs to be done, to do what needs to be done, and not what is popular.
I was quoting the Yanjas Polling Institute figures. One last question, Mr. President, regarding the situation in Venezuela. Violence is going on. Some would like to hear you a bit more about the situation. What is your position about the situation in Venezuela? Some say it's a dictatorship. There's some violence. What do you think?
Yes, Venezuela is going through a very serious crisis. Colombia's position is quite clear. We make it absolutely clear that we do not support what is happening currently in Venezuela, but we would like to see a non-violent solution. Violence would only aggravate even further the problems of Venezuela.
Violence is here already.
Yes, but we need to avoid a situation which would resort to weapons and civil war. This would be the worst solution for Venezuela and for the region. This is why we want to promote a solution involving dialogue. I think this is the only solution that we can envisage. Obviously, we have to bring pressure to bear for such a solution to be possible. At the moment, Venezuela is in impasse, and this further aggravates the polarization of the country.
Thank you, Mr. President Juan Manuel Santos. Thank you, dear Marc. And thanks for the listeners and the viewers of France 24 and Radio France Internationale. Thank you and stay tuned.